I have a couple of clips that I want to show you, and I want you to take some mental notes on which ones you prefer and why you think they stand out. My guess is that one of these were your favorite, and the reason why is, well, because they have good sound design. But if sound design can make such a big difference, why is it so rarely emphasized and talked about, especially in motion design? Well, not only can it be tedious to do, but it's also such a subtle detail that most of the time we don't even actively register it. And if we're being honest, as designers or even cinematographers, we usually tend to focus on the visual aspect. It's what we work with, it's visual, and it makes sense. But what makes even more sense is to think about the whole experience that someone is having when they watch your work. As with anything, I think it's always a good idea to learn by doing and experimenting, because you learn so much more by actually doing and being in it. But there are a couple of things I like to keep in mind when I work with sound design. And the main thing with that is the goal of the sound design. What is it we want to achieve with the sound design that we are doing? Now, with movies or anything in the real world, it's usually Foley that we think about, anything that's realistic. So I like to think of it as sound design that you can see with your eyes. If someone is taking a drink or walking in snow, our brains know what sounds make sense, and that's usually the sounds that you want to work with when you're doing that. But in motion design, we are just moving digital pixels made up by a computer, so there's no actual real sound coming from it. We have a lot more creative liberty, but we also have to be a lot more aware of what we do and why we do it. First, I highly recommend not doing sound design in After Effects. It's just way too tedious. If you do your sound design in DaVinci Resolve like I do, or Premiere or Final Cut, it just makes it a lot easier to keep track of all the layers and the timing of everything. My approach to sound design goes through a small process. I usually like to start with the atmosphere or vibe of the piece, so I knew kind of the direction I wanted to go. That's a good thing to have in mind, is just try and make sure everything is coherent and that the sound space feels the same throughout. The next step of the process is building and selling momentum or movement. I want to make sure that I pick the right sounds to emphasize the weight and the severity of whatever I animate. So something small or not as important won't sound as deep and big as the main part of it. So the last two steps of that process is depth and material. So for depth, I like to not only layer the sounds to create depth, but also faking depth by playing with the volume or the panning of the audio. So if something goes from left to right, I'll usually shift the pan so that it starts on the left hand side and follows the object to the right hand side, just to create some of that feeling. And then depth, so something is louder when it's closer to you, and then the further it goes away, the more distant it sounds. And for materials, I like to think about what materials something might have. So like in this example today, we have the crown sound. So I used a ding sound to help sell the effect of it being metal clanging. And all of these steps are meant to bring everything together so that in the end we have a really cohesive piece that sounds like it makes sense, even though it's all digital and made up sound. Now with that out of the way, I want to get into this specific piece so we can have a look at the entire process and what it looks like on a timeline. So here we have the project that I want to go over today. This is my timeline that I was working with. You can imagine if you had to work with this in After Effects, it would be a mess. I don't know about Premiere or Final Cut, but in DaVinci Resolve, they make it super easy to mess with the semitones, sets, and speed change, and the pan, so it just makes it so much easier to customize the sounds that you have in there. The layering and mixing and matching sounds is the most important part of sound design, because you want to make something that fits the project. You don't want to just drag and drop and have that be it. The first step of the process, which is building the atmosphere. So for that, I wanted to use something that was very sci-fi and kind of felt like outer space feel, because to match the background. And then I also wanted a sound effect that could help me sell the effect of the particles being there. For that, I used a fire crackling. So, you know, just if you could imagine yourself sitting by a fireplace, that's the sound that I kind of went for with that. From there, I want to build and sell movement and momentum. I have a lot of different sounds that I've layered and edited a bit for our initial in. I have two sound effects. I have a magic fireball, so a very deep and kind of scratchy sound, as well as a film burn, just to kind of help sell the movement of it coming in from behind you, coming in. So I want it to be fairly deep and I want it to have some weight, so that's where the fireball effect helps sell it. And then once the crown hits, I have layered three different sounds. I have a glass clinking sound that I changed the semitones on, and also adjusted the volume a bit. I wanted to use this ding sound to help sell the effect that the crown is made of something else than just pixels. So here I went for kind of a metally heavy sound. where I also use 2 impact sounds to help sell the effect that it's hitting and creating the eye out of it. Here we have 3 sound effects for 1 movement, and that's mainly just to create the depth and realism and weight. It's all up to your imagination and what feels right for this specific case, but for this project, I wanted to match the entire feel of it being out of space and very heavy and breathy, if that's a word. For the text merging into the eye, I used 2 sound effects. I used a car passing sound, a really fast car passing sound, and a bullet flying by your ear. So for the fast car, I decreased the semitones a bit just to make it sound a bit deeper. And again, with the bullet whiz, since it was very high pitched and fast, I also decreased the semitones a whole bunch to create a really deep and airy sound. One of my favorite parts of this was actually the double swoosh. I have 1 swoosh sound that I use for the up and down. For the down, I have the swoosh just playing normal, just decrease the semitones again to help create that airy feel. And then I duplicated that sound and reversed it to sell the up effect. The reason why I didn't just use the same swoosh sound or even just a different one is because it didn't feel bouncy enough. The whole point of this animation that we see on screen is that it bounces up and shoots back up. So I wanted to create some audio bounce, if that makes sense. Reversed it, put it right next to each other, and then we get a which just sounds a lot cooler in my opinion. At the very end, we have a swoosh. I layer 2 sounds. We have a flapping wing sound that just decreased the volume a bit just to really sell the impact and the emphasis and the weight. And then just another just spacey opener sound, whatever you can call it. For this specific project, I went for a lot of sounds that aren't necessarily what you'd imagine something sounding like, but you can use a lot of different sounds and combine them and edit them a little bit to fit your project. That's how you end up with the best sound design if you customize it to fit your exact project. I'm no sound expert, but one trick that I picked up very quickly is layering and using a lot of different sounds to simulate a sound that you might have in your head. We have total creative liberty, so we might as well use it and make something fun. Sound design isn't easy, and it'll take a lot of time, and it can be very tedious to find all the right sounds and layering them and adjusting them to fit your exact project. But in the end, it'll end up improving your project tenfold. It's our job to deliver the best product to our clients. One way we can do that is by learning and using sound design, and I hope you learned something from this video. If not, I hope it was enjoyable enough for you to watch. But I'll see you guys or girls next week. Bye.